We are about as high as anyone is on rookie Ladd McConkey, but could he truly be wide receiver one for the Chargers in 2024 and lead them in targets?
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers together for 8 seasons now, but this is our 6th season as a host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen today, and to make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Daniel, I don't think it's out of the question at all to see Ladd McConkey lead this team in targets and possibly receptions in his rookie season. And hey, can we see Joe Alt make it to a Pro Bowl? I don't think that's out of the question either, and I am very excited about the prospects of Junior Coulson stepping in and playing right away.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are high expectations, especially on the picks from day 1 and 2, and I think for good reason. We loved all of those picks, but today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. Dave, this is something we love to do, getting into our Chargers, buy or sells, doing it a little bit late this week. The draft obviously messed everything up there, but we do have a bunch of storylines and overreactions that I've seen, especially since the Chargers draft, that I thought we could address today, including this. Basically, if Ladd McConkey is going to be wide receiver one for the Chargers, it starts with just the kind of point that there's not a super high bar, right? There's no real, there's no 1,000-yard wide receiver in that room. But we'll make the buy or sell this today. Buy or sell, Ladd McConkey will lead the Chargers in targets in 2024.
Yeah, I think as crazy as this might sound, I'm going to buy it, Daniel. And the reason why I'm going to buy it is because I feel like Ladd McConkey steps in right away, and he's the best pure separator that the Chargers have in their wide receiver room. And I think that's bar none. I love Josh Palmer. I think he has a great rapport with Justin Herbert. But I think just looking at Ladd McConkey's route tree, the way that he can win at all levels of the defense, I feel very comfortable saying that he is going to be that dude.
I think the other thing that you could throw in there too is just like this is the only receiver that's been added under this new regime, as far as the first receiver added at the very least, but the guy that they expect to be a main contributor in this offense since Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh took over. I think that the rapport is something you brought up with Josh Palmer, I think plays a big part of it. And I would buy it too if you're telling me that he's healthy, because I think health is the only way that you could get in the way of that. And it's either him or Josh Palmer to me right now as we see it.
That's where I'm at.
To me, that's pretty clear to me. That's where I would go with it, obviously, because Quentin Johnston's the biggest unknown, as much as we would hope for a breakout season. But, I mean, part of the reason that Keenan Allen got 1 million targets and Quentin Johnston did not last year is because Justin Herbert trusted him. There's no one on this team right now that Justin Herbert trusts as much as Josh Palmer, as far as who he's looking at on game day, who those targets are going to. But Josh Palmer's also had a lot of durability issues. But it does sound kind of crazy because Ladd McConkey never led Georgia in receiving yards or receptions or any of those, categories. So It does seem crazy. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility, just because I do think he is that get open guy. I think he will quickly become one of Justin Herbert's favorite targets, just because Justin Herbert likes to go through his reads. And if he sees Ladd McConkey beating his man one-on-one as many times as we think he could, I think he'll become a favorite of his very, very early on. So let's get to the next buy or sell here, David, because there have been some rumors and some meetings and some visiting going on in the Chargers post-free agency after the draft, and free agency post-draft. And the buy or sell is this: the Chargers will add another wide receiver in free agency before the season begins.
Daniel, I think before I answer this, I'm just going to go into this wide receiver room and tell you all the ages of the players that they have here. Josh Palmer, 24. Quentin Johnston, 22. Simi Fehoko, 26. Darius Davis, 23. Ladd McConkey is 22 years old. Most of those guys, I feel pretty good about them joining the roster. Not to mention Brendan Rice and obviously Cornelius Johnson, both rookies as well, both very young players. And there's also information out there that the Chargers have met with Tyler Boyd. So I think I'm going to buy the fact that they are going to add a veteran wide receiver to this room. There's just not a lot of experience in that room right now, and I feel like this room could benefit from bringing in a veteran.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of it. But at that point, though, it becomes kind of a numbers game, right?
Yeah.
Because you just drafted 3 wide receivers. How much room is there really in that wide receiver room? Because you have, I think, locks for this roster right now: Quentin Johnston, Josh Palmer, even Darius Davis. And we'll talk more about him just because, I mean, as a special teams player, I think he's established himself. And then you have 3 rookies, right? And that's 6 wide receivers. How many wide receivers is a Greg Roman offense going to keep on game day or, going into the season? I think that's a valid question. I think I would buy it just because of the sheer interest that they've shown in free agent wide receivers. It's not just Tyler Boyd, who Jeremy Fowler said has met with Los Angeles this week and is now headed to the Titans later on in the week. But it's also Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who they met with earlier before the draft. It's also DJ Shark, who they met before the draft. So they've obviously shown a lot of interest. And, I mean, not only just the experience, David, talk about the, proven production that's in that room. You have one dude in that room right now that's had a 500-yard season in the NFL.
Yeah.
And it's Josh Palmer. And he has some durability issues just as Ladd McConkey does, right, going into this season. So I do think they will add a wide receiver in free agency. But then the numbers start getting tricky as far as who's going to make this team, which leads us to the next buy or sell we got here from Shaggy619, who says, buy or sell, all 9 Chargers rookies will make the team. I think you're always hoping they will, right? I think we talked a little bit about it when we got to the draft grades, just as far as, hey, those late receivers, good grades, but it could become tough if it becomes a numbers game. If the Chargers add a wide receiver, David, in free agency, I think I would sell this as far as all 9 rookies actually making the opening 53-man roster.
That's the biggest contingency for me as well, Daniel. I think obviously it is definitely a legitimate possibility as it stands right now that they, just punt on adding a veteran wide receiver and they feel comfortable with the people that they drafted and who is currently on the roster. I can definitely see that happening. But if they do add a veteran wide receiver, I think it's going to be really, really tough for them to be able to keep all of those rookies, especially those 2 on the back end with Brendan Rice and Cornelius Johnson. I mean, those 2 might find themselves on the practice squad if they do bring in a veteran.
Yeah, and I think when you're looking at, obviously, which rookies are most likely to get cut, you go to the very end, right? You go to the 6th round picks, you go to the 7th round picks. I think, most of Chargers and previous regimes, 6th round picks made the team. I mean, I think the last one I can think of that didn't was probably, Dylan Cantrell?
Yeah.
Probably back in the day. Dylan Cantrell, I think, is the last one. Before that, it was either Marion Grice or Tevin Reese, one of the 2 of them, whichever one was.
Yeah, I think Tevin was a 7th round pick, but
one of those 2 was the 6th, and one of those 2 was the 7th, and both of them ended up not making the roster that year. But mostly the 6th round pick. So Kamani Vidal, I mean, unless I'd put Isaiah Spiller almost more on the roster bubble than I would with Kamani Vidal. Maybe they'll just carry 4 running backs, so maybe it's a moot point, anyways. But wide receiver, I don't see them carrying 7 wide receivers. I just don't.
Yeah.
So if they add a free agent wide receiver, it seems like it could come down to a competition between Brendan Rice and Cornelius Johnson, and maybe Cornelius Johnson is someone they feel like they could stash on the practice squad. I mean, I think whatever one it is, they will try to bring back on the practice squad, and we'll see if another team would be willing, after passing on those guys for 7 rounds, would want to actually take one of those guys on their active roster right away. I think that Sime Fehoko, I would be surprised if he makes the team at this point. So I'm not even really factoring him into this situation because, like I said, I think Darius Davis, Josh Palmer, Quentin Johnston are all locks. I think with Darius Davis, you brought back Ryan Ficken. I don't think there's going to be – I mean, another thing is just Darius Davis has already shown you he can be an elite punt returner.
He's a second-team All-Pro returner.
So maybe he's in his own category. Maybe, they could argue 7 wide receivers, but it's really 6 with the special teams player because I don't know, especially with all the wide receivers they're adding, that Darius Davis is going to see any real share of the offense, especially if you're going to be a more balanced team with less attempts passing the football.
Yeah.
Just my opinion right now, but I definitely think there could be one of those guys in the 7th round, even though they were steals, even though you got great value on them, that could be on the outside looking in if they are to really bring in one of these veteran wide receivers. And with how young that room is, it feels like that's a very real possibility. But I do want to talk about another big thing going out there as far as how Joe Alt is going to transition to the right side. So the buy or sell day is going to be he will make a Pro Bowl, just like his daddy did, on the right side after playing left tackle in college football. So we're going to get into all that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go, and I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that, but there's just too much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock, and there's so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini-games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine, and there's always new timed events to help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun going on and something to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now, free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. All right, David, let's continue this buy or sell here, and we'll continue talking about these Chargers rookies because it is so much fun to kind of project what these guys are going to be able to do. There's a lot of hype. If you heard yesterday's show going through the draft grades, you know we gave a lot of really good grades out. Some of that wasn't still good enough for you guys. I guess A's aren't always enough for you guys, but we really, really liked what the Chargers did. Straight A's on days 1 and 2 for them, like we talked about on yesterday's show. And one of the most oft talked about guys is Joe Alt. Obviously, you took him 5th overall, and I think when you take someone 5th overall, you're not hoping for a league average starter, right? You're hoping to get one of the best players at their position, a top 5 player at their position in the league when you spend that kind of investment on someone, especially an offensive tackle, especially with who was available, right?
Yeah.
So the buy or sell is this. Joe Alt will make a Pro Bowl in his career at right tackle.
Yeah, I'm going to buy it, and I'm buying it pretty quickly because I feel like Joe Alt has all of the tools to be a dominant tackle in the National Football League. The size, the strength, the technical acumen, it's all there. The intelligence. I really feel like this is a guy who's going to come in, and it might take a few games for him to get comfortable, but I feel very, very confident that in a few years he is going to be a Pro Bowl player.
And I know what some of you are thinking as far as Pro Bowl goes with someone like Joe Alt, like Pro Bowls are a popularity contest, whereas something like All-Pro is probably a better indication of how good you're playing. But at the same time, Pro Bowls are voted for by not just the fans, but also the players and the coaches as well. And All-Pro means you're top 1 or 2 at your position. So I think it's obviously very hard to kind of project that at this point, even though you'd obviously hope so. But if you're looking at Pro Bowl, I think it's absolutely possible. I would buy it for sure. I mean, if you look at the tackles on the AFC side last year, Larry Tunsil, Deion Dawkins, and Teron Armstead Armstead's getting up there. Deion Dawkins is 30 plus too. Yeah. It'd be a lot harder if you're going up against, guys like Lane Johnson at right tackle. If you're going up against Penei Sewell at right tackle in the NFC, it'd be a little tougher. But I think there is kind of a path here where he can absolutely, if he lives up to his expectations, right, at right tackle, because I'm not as worried about him changing sides, having played quarterback, but also tight end and lining up on both sides of the line of scrimmage, which is, when you're going back and blocking and going forward, those are all things that are important. But also someone who came in at Notre Dame and was playing on the right side before he ended up getting his start at left tackle. So I'm not worried about that very much at all. I think he could absolutely make a Pro Bowl and be a top 3 kind of tackle in the American Football Conference. I don't think that's out of the question at all. But a tier has even loftier expectations for the Chargers rookie right tackle. So let's hear what he has for us in his buy or sell this week.
Hi, Dan. Hi, David. This is Atir. Okay, Dan, this is for you. Buy or sell. Joe Alt will not give up 3 sacks this upcoming season and surprise everybody as the best right tackle in the NFL. I'm buying this. What says you? Thank you. Cannot wait till I hear you.
I love you, Atir, first off. Second off, man, that's really, really tough because you're not even saying 3. You're saying 2, really. Yeah. I mean, he's going to give up 2 or less, basically, because you're saying he's giving up less than 3 sacks. I'm not going to put those expectations on him. I mean, you're talking about Trey Pipkins gave up 9 last year. So I think you'd be very, very happy if it ends up being 4 or 5. I'm going to go ahead and sell that. Maybe he gets close to it. I mean, Penei Sewell gave up 5 sacks as a rookie when he switched to the right side. But then you have guys like Tristan Wirfs for the Buccaneers who he changed sides and he gave up 1 sack as a rookie. So it can be done. He's going to be going up against a good share of Max Crosby and some other really talented pass rushers, but I do think it can be done, but I'm not going to put those expectations on him. I'm going to sell it.
Yeah, I'm selling it as well. Even the great Rashawn Slater allowed 4 sacks in his rookie season. As you mentioned, Penei Sewell gave up
Playing
5
his natural
sacks.
position too,
Right,
right?
playing his, Christian Darrisaw gave up 5 sacks. It's just coming into this league, it's a different speed. These pass rushers are so darn good. They have so many different counters. They have so many different ways to beat you. They're so smart. They really know how to study tape. They know how to exploit weaknesses. I just think that's just way too much to ask for a rookie coming into the National Football League to give up less than 3 sacks in his inaugural season. I just think that's too much to ask.
Yeah, and I think that he is in very good hands. I think the Chargers offense, the way they're building it, the way they want to be balanced is going to protect him. Less passing attempts than normal. Hopefully you're getting yourself into way less 3rd and 10 plus situations where a lot of sacks are coming because you have to hold on to the football longer. That's just science, right? So I think that when you're looking at who he has, and also a guy in Greg Roman who in 2012 had every one of his single offensive linemen make some sort of Pro Bowl, right? Get some sort of nod at the Pro Bowl, which I'm confident he could do it. Joe Alt could do it, just like his dad did as a 2-time Pro Bowler under Greg Roman and, this new staff. 3 is just a really low number. And I think the thing is like, if he gives up 4 or 5, it doesn't necessarily mean he had a bad season. There's a lot of metrics you could go with. There's a lot of kind of blame that can be shared as far as who gets attributed sacks and things like that. So I don't worry too much about the number, but I do think that, he could get close to that. And I think, you would still take it every single day of the week. But with this, drafting of Joe Alt, it puts the Chargers in an interesting situation, or maybe it didn't seem interesting until Jim Harbaugh started talking about it, because now your starter, Trey Pipkins, who I think a lot of people wanted to see upgrade at right tackle and, would be good with that. But Jim Harbaugh went out and said after the signing of drafting of Joe Alt that Trey Pipkins is still one of the top 5 offensive linemen on this team, which gets you to start thinking, okay, well, if he isn't going to be playing right tackle, because Jim Harbaugh also said Joe Alt is a tackle, and he also said Rashawn Slater is our left tackle.
Yeah.
Do the math, right? They're not going to play him at guard, and he's not going to play on the left side. That only leaves one spot. But then Jim Harbaugh also said, hey, if I could have my offensive line be entirely tackles, I would do that. So the buy or sell here is this, David. Trey Pipkins will be in the starting offensive line in week 1.
Yeah, I know what Jim Harbaugh said, and I can appreciate that. He also said the offensive linemen can be weapons. It's just that's what Jim Harbaugh believes. I'm going to sell it. I think that they drafted Joe Alt to be the right tackle and for him to start right away. And Trey Pipkins has absolutely no experience playing guard whatsoever that I know about. So going back to college, he was a tackle. In the National Football League, he has been a tackle. So I just don't see him being able to transition to guard in one off season and be able to beat out Jamari Sawyer or Zion Johnson. I think that he's ticketed for the swing tackle bench position.
That seems like the most likely outcome to me. I would sell it to, at the same time, man, like, it seems borderline insane that you could go into the season and not have any legitimate competition for Jamari Sawyer and Zion Johnson at those 2 guard spots. Because say what you will about Trey Pipkins, those guys had as much, if not more, to do with how bad the pass protection was for the Chargers as Trey Pipkins did. He got scapegoated a little bit, and the Chargers did not draft a guard. A couple undrafted guys maybe could push them. Maybe, Jordan McFadden or someone like that could push them. But no real competition as we see it. And I mean, I'll just give Zion Johnson the spot at left guard because I don't want to tell him that he, has to find somebody else for it. But like, you have to try to upgrade on one of those 2 positions, man. I mean, I think you're hoping that this new coaching staff can improve the guys that you have. But that was the biggest weakness last year, was not the tackles. It was the interior of the Chargers offensive line.
That's true.
And they replaced one of those guys, right? Corey Linsley retired. You're replacing Will Clapp with, Bradley Bozeman. But at the same time, who do you have pushing those other 2 guys for a spot? If they want to do that with Trey Pipkins, go for it. I feel like I remember, man, when Brian Bulaga was signed, I feel like the Chargers thought about moving Trey Pipkins to guard for a little bit just because.
I mean, Trey's been a good run blocker. I mean, he definitely has the power to do it.
Gigantic guard, though. Right?
Yeah, he's like 6'7". He's gigantic. Yeah,
it's a little over 6'6". I mean, who knows? It's hard for me to imagine, though, that he's just going to. We just don't know if he's good at it, right? Like, he just kind of started coming to his own at tackle, and even that was kind of an inconsistent thing. So I don't necessarily see him going out there and winning one of the guard spots. I think you having, actually been left tackle and right tackle in games for the Chargers in the past, that he could be a very good, very, very expensive swing tackle for this team, which is most likely what it's going to be. I just don't feel confident saying, as we sit here right now, that he's going to start at guard, because it's like, are you going to give him a chance at right tackle? I mean, even though you think it's going to be Joe Alt there anyways, are you going to have those two compete, or are you just giving it to Joe Alt? Do you want to just have him focus on the inside? That's going to be one of the more interesting storylines as we go into training camp and the rest of the offseason. But we still have more as far as rookie expectations go, because I think one of the big things that kind of everyone is just saying is that Junior Coulson will be the starter at linebacker for the Chargers in week 1. Is that an overreaction? We're going to get into that and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. I do need to tell you guys about FanDuel, though, because it is playoff time in the NBA and NHL, and baseball is in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed, one of the best deals that they're going to have all year long. That's $150, win or lose. You place the bet, you win, you get $150 in bonus bets. If you lose, you get $150 in bonus bets. Plus, they also know how you like to bet and will help you find the right bets. Like, you can go to their most popular parlays, the one they have going on for the night. If you want to bet on playoff basketball, you go with the Knicks-Sixers game, go Jalen Brunson to score 30+, Josh Hart to pull in 10+ rebounds, and Joel Embiid to also get 10+ rebounds, and Tyrese Maxey to make 5+ threes. If you do that, you can get that at plus 731. That's good plus money then. But you could also bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, David, we have some more Chargers buy or sell as the biggest storylines and overreactions. And make sure you guys are back here tomorrow when we turn it over to you for Fan Mail Friday. For those who didn't get a buy or sell in, or those who did, make sure you hit us up at LockedOnLAC on Twitter. We'll put a post out so you can get your question on tomorrow's show. And also make sure you guys are checking out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever national 24/7 sports streaming channel where you get 24-hour coverage of every sport covered by their local experts, people that you know are covering those teams every day of the week, because it is your team every day. So make sure you guys subscribe to Locked On Sports Today, first ever national 24/7 sports streaming channel. Let's get to the buy or sells here, David, and we have a good one to start this segment about Junior Coulson, another guy we are very high on, a guy that got an A+ from both of us on the draft grade show yesterday. So the buy or sell for Junior Coulson is this. Junior Coulson will be the starting middle linebacker, or a starting middle linebacker, I should say, in week 1.
Daniel, if this was literally any other linebacker that the Chargers drafted, I would sell it immediately, because they just don't transition well to the NFL. But there's not many other linebackers that get to play in the same exact defense that they commanded in college in the NFL. So for that very specific reason, I am buying it. I think he will start, and I think he will be the green dot in week 1. I think he is going to be your starting inside linebacker.
Yeah, I can think of one, maybe two, like maybe Luke Kuechly, Shaq Leonard, as far as guys that came in and just kind of blew things away. I mean, we're talking about, defensive rookie of the years with those guys, but it's hard to do, and we've talked about it, but you almost never get this situation, though. It would be like, the Packers got Jeff Hafley or whatever, and they went and got Boston College's middle linebacker to go play in their defense and start. Like, you just don't have, like, that college coach being the defensive coordinator for that linebacker that team is drafting very often. So we're in a little bit of uncharted waters here, because it's hard to know, having not seen something like this and the precedent for it. They were playing a very NFL style of defense at Michigan. That's going to help him. I think also just with how you heard Navarro Bowman talk about him, with how you saw that whole draft room react when they got him, they see him as a starting linebacker. I think where it gets a little interesting is they also brought in Denzel Perryman, right? Both of those guys in a perfect world are playing Mike linebacker, right? The goal eventually is, I think, to have him play Mike and have Deion Henley play the will, as far as who the linebackers will be in a 4-2-5 defense, which is what Jesse Minter is going to run. So it'll be interesting. I'd be surprised if he's not the starter. I think he's going to flash a lot because his play style just kind of leads to that.
Yeah.
I hope it's Deion Henley in him, and I hope, you have Denzel Perryman for situational type of moments. I think you have him as great depth, great veteran leadership for that room. I'm going to buy it. I think he starts for the Chargers in week 1. I just think he's that good of a player. So let's get to the next buy or sell, and this one's a little tougher because the Chargers also drafted back-to-back cornerbacks in the 5th round, but it's also the 5th round. How much can you expect from a 5th round pick, going into his first season? At the same time, the Chargers cornerback room is very shaky to say the least right now. So the buy or sell is this. One of Cam Harp or Tarheeb Still is going to start for the Chargers in week 1.
Yeah, I mean, I think with this situation here, I am going to buy it, and I think it's because Tarheeb Still, I think to me, profiles very well as that nickel or that slot corner. And I'll go as far as to say that I think Asante Samuel Jr. is going to be on the outside on one side, Christian Fulton's going to be on the other side, and you're going to have Tarheeb Still in that slot corner position. I think that is what your cornerback group is going to look like week 1.
Yeah, man, I think a lot of it just has to do with what the competition is. It's hard to know how this coaching staff feels about, someone like Ja Taylor, who played the slot last year before eventually getting benched. The other big kind of thing here that we don't know is if they add another player to this room, because I know if I was them, I would at least be considering trying to find another cornerback, another guy with some experience to add to this room, because there's a lot of young guys in it. I mean, Jasir Taylor, Dean Leonard, not a ton of playing time between them. And I think that with Cam Hart, he is starting behind all 3 of those guys on the outside between Dean Leonard, right, and the other 2 guys you have starting. So it's going to be tough. I think that's probably the most likely scenario, though. I could definitely see Tarheeb Still giving Jasir Taylor a run for his money. I would say yes. I think you're really one injury away from one of them almost being pressed into action right now. So with the way that looks right now, if they add a veteran corner, obviously that changes things a little bit. But I'll buy it. I mean, I like Tarheeb Still. I think, they see a little bit of Mikey Sanders still in him. I think there's a reason why they took a slot corner before they ended up taking an outside corner, even though it was only a difference of 3 picks. But they had to make that pick knowing that Cam Hart might not be there in 3 more picks. So they went with Tarheeb Still first, a reach by the consensus board, but obviously they really wanted to get him, and they didn't want to take the chance that somebody else could be the team that reached out for him. So I think it could definitely happen. I think the ball skills, the tackling ability, the physicality that he showed in college all translate to him playing in the slot at the NFL level. So let's get to this last buy or sell here. We got from Rob Keenan, who says, buy or sell. The Chargers will have more rushing attempts than passing attempts in 2024. And this kind of goes to the core of what this show is supposed to be. When you see overreactions like this, and sometimes they're not overreactions. But David, are you buying or selling this?
Yeah, I think when you look at, Greg Roman as an offensive coordinator back in San Francisco, there's only one season where they threw the ball more than they ran the ball.
Yep,
and then
I saw that too.
You look at in Baltimore, again, one season where they threw the ball more than they ran the ball. But there is one gigantic reason why I'm going to sell it, and that is the 6'6" drink of water, Justin Herbert. I do think it's going to be a lot closer to balance than the 65-35 that it has been the last couple of seasons. I think it's going to be closer to 55-45, but I still have them edging out pass attempts over rushing attempts.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. It was crazy to see that. So that's 6 of his 8 seasons with Baltimore or San Francisco. They ran the ball more than they threw the ball. None of those teams had Justin Herbert. Lamar Jackson's obviously a 2-time MVP, but his rushing totals obviously played a big factor in those times.
No doubt.
In Baltimore. Colin Kaepernick, not the runner that Lamar Jackson is by any means, but obviously ran the football a decent amount too in their time in the San Francisco 49ers. And then you also look at the Bills, 2015. Ran the ball more than they threw the ball. So that's been Greg Roman's calling card. I would be shocked if that happens in 2024. I truly would be. I mean, I think if you have Justin Herbert, if you're drafting 3 wide receivers, if you're still bringing in free agent wide receivers and trying to sell them on the vision, I don't think the vision is, hey, we're going to try to run the ball 40 times a game.
We need you to
and
run
pass
block
the
every
ball
snap.
23. Yeah, like you're going to come here and you're going to run block, and that's your role. So I would be shocked if a Justin Herbert team ever ran the ball more than they threw it, assuming that he's going to play in 18 games. But I understand the question, especially when you see the history. I mean, me and you looked at the same thing, and it was like, oh, no, this is something Greg Roman does every year almost. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I do think it is much more balanced. I'd be really shocked, though, if they didn't throw the ball with Justin Herbert more than running the ball, even with the collection of running backs and offensive line that they have. But that's going to wrap things up for today's show. Make sure you guys are back here tomorrow when it is our first Fan Mail Friday since the draft. So if you guys want to get in on that, hit us up at LockedOnLAC. We'll put a post out on Twitter. You can also call into the voicemail line like a tier at 323-524-7924. Get your 30-second Chargers question on there, and there's a good chance you get on the show. But you can also make sure you don't miss it by going and following and subscribing to the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listening wherever you get your podcast from. You can also hit me and David up on Twitter and see the show there as well. You can find me at Dan Talk Sports, and David Jorgmeyer's DMs are always open at Dro Talk SD. We also post a show every day to our Instagram at Locked On Chargers and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. So make sure you guys want to get in on the action. First Fan Mail Friday in 2 weeks, so get your questions in. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.